Hello, and welcome to episode number 201 of the LSR podcast. My name is Matt Brown, joined each and every week by the brightest minds in all of the gaming industry. With me, I have my dudes, Adam Candee and Dustin Gouker. You can follow them on the Twitter machine absolutely free, and you should smash the button at Dustin Gouker, at Adam Candee, 2 E's, no Y. And if you hate yourself, you can follow me at Matt Brown M2. All the things that we say each and every week do apply. Everything we do is free. So if you want to go ahead, hit the subscribe button, give us thumbs ups, all the things, comments, et cetera, et cetera. We do appreciate all of that. Helps us climb the charts. So we like that a ton. We'll talk about a lot of DFS stuff here, or if you're watching on the video side of things, DFS, I will do the little air quote stuff. Iowa, we'll talk some NFL as well. And earnings have come out for some of these books as well. But let's kick things off here, Adam. Listen, this is something we've talked about, I think, 3 consecutive podcasts now, just about the what is not daily fantasy sports. And some of the states are starting to decide for themselves what is and what is not daily fantasy sports.
Yeah, if you think that you mistakenly got episode number 1 instead of episode number 201 because we're here talking about all of these DFS operators, no, it is the year 2023, and we are talking a lot about what is and is not fantasy sports, what is and is not prop betting. This is one of the wildest weeks I've ever experienced at Legal Sports Report in terms of the pace of some of the news that's been coming down. So let's recap what has happened this week alone. We reported at LSR that the state of Wyoming sent cease and desist letters to Underdog and Prize Picks, telling them that what they had in the state essentially qualifies as sports betting, right? Saying under statute, it's sports betting. We thought that would be the wildest thing that happened this week. Then when we looked up the next day, we found out that the state of Maine had sent a complaint letter to Underdog about the exact same thing. And then just yesterday, we reported that the state of New York has updated its register because they got a question from someone saying, hey, can we make clear that these prop bet markets are under fantasy sports? And New York's response essentially was forget about it, when they said, yeah, no, these are essentially sports betting. Like, let's be clear, these are sports betting. So now it's Wyoming, Maine, and New York. And I'll give everybody a little bit of a preview of a story that's going to publish very soon at Legal Sports Report. These letters
That's why you come to the pod. See, you're getting the inside info right here. See that? That's why you come to the pod.
Scoop de loop right here with us on the pod. The letters were dated July 5th. From Wyoming, signed by Charles Moore, the executive director of the Wyoming Gaming Commission. And the first word that we got, and it was almost identical from both Prize Picks and Underdog, was that they never received any letters. So we went back to Wyoming and said, hey, we have letters in our hands that have your letterhead that are signed by your executive director. And the executive director said, yep, that's my signature. Yep, we sent them. Now we're going back to Prize Picks and Underdog, and the company line has become, we are working with regulators. So now we've gone away from the whole idea of we never got the letters. So one of them is headquartered in Georgia. One of them is headquartered in Brooklyn, New York. I'm guessing the Postal Service did not fail in both cases, but we will leave that up to the regulators to figure out in the end.
So, Dustin, we take a look at this, and I think anyone listening to this podcast probably is aware of the business model, but it is, I guess we can do a little bit of a refresher here with all of this. I mean, the interesting thing about, so this was Prize Picks business model from day one, right? This was basically what they did. Underdog started as just a best ball company, and then they kind of evolved into some of this other stuff as well. But what we're looking at here is, I guess in their eyes, technically it's daily fantasy sports because you have to take multiple different ways. You can't just bet one single outcome. There are multiple outcomes, and they all have to hit in some way, shape, or form in order for you to win some sort of money. So I guess that's how they are viewing this, as being some sort of daily fantasy sports contest. But from a any of us that are in the industry and have ever sports bet before, it just looks like a parlay to us. So just to kind of give people the quick, quick and dirty here of the business model that we are talking about that these states are kind of coming after.
Yeah, I mean, I think the simplest way I've come to about describing it is there's a Venn diagram of fantasy sports and sports betting. And you could be both. You could be in this, this interlap of like, oh, it's fantasy sports legally under the definition of the Unlawful Internet Gambling Enforcement Act. Some states, obviously some states are now pushing back whether that definition of fantasy sports covers this, but like it could sometimes be both things at the same time. Sometimes there's just fantasy sports over here, sports betting over here. But yeah, the rules, the UIGEA like says it has to be players from two different teams, right? So that's why like you could go on you could place a fantasy sports contest entry on last night's Hall of Fame game by picking over under the number of receiving yards for the quarterbacks of both teams. That's, again, air quotes, fantasy sports, based on the legal definition that some of these companies are using. So, yeah, I think we've been talking this for a while. I've been saying this for a while. Like this, it's clearly sports betting, just using a legal interpretation of fantasy sports laws, game of skill laws, and UIGEA. And we finally have some evidence of like several states now saying, if it walks like a duck, it's a duck, and pushing back on this. And at the end of the day, there's a couple things that we're watching for these companies that I think like none of it. This has all been very bad news for them. Obviously, that the model is being questioned. But the two big things are the three big states. They're operating pick'em contest in California, Florida, and Texas. Three biggest states don't have sports betting. Until any of those states shut them down, like it's kind of like, does it matter? Because like New York, this great, not great that they're losing access to New York, but they're up against actual sports betting where you can just place actual parlays and all of that. The other part is payment processing. This is and we're gonna get into the history lesson of DFS. Like this was DFS 1.0. The problem in the background was always payment processing, like whether that was going to continue with this legal, what the legal climate around everything that's going on. And payment processors, I think they were all like may have already been getting cold feet, and now I'd imagine they really are. Now we have 3 states within a space of a week saying this DFS product is actually sports betting, and I would be starting to get worried about continuing to process payments because now we're triggering the Wire Act, federal laws, things like that. Once we have that out there, again, like this is what I was living through in circa 2015 and 16 when we were doing this the first time with DraftKings and FanDuel. It's just been like on a like Adam says, we've been on this like everything's been compacted into a short time now, and it's the speed of it and the velocity of it's just been a lot faster than the first time around.
So, Adam, we look at it, and I mean, listen, on the surface, if you look, I mean, what we consider to be fantasy sports, like let's talk about when we were children, right? Like we know what fantasy sports are there. Now, there's been evolution of fantasy sports along the way. Of course, DFS is still fairly easily recognizable to a fantasy player. It's just, it's just you're taking those guys' results for that week as opposed to an entire season. But I mean, it's pretty easy learning curve with all that. And then you look at this and like, again, it's very hard for me to kind of get there as to how in the world this would be considered fantasy sports, right? I mean, I don't care if you have to put multiple things together and you can't just do a singular outcome. If you're betting an over-under, I mean, like if you're betting an over-under is freaking sports betting, right? I mean, like it's like any way you look at it. Like I understand why some of these lawmakers are questioning this. I understand why DraftKings and FanDuel were pissed off about it. I understand actually why these companies were doing it until they were told they couldn't do it. Because if you can toe that line and you can kind of offer something to these major states, like Dustin said, that these other companies can't do, I kind of understand why they were doing it. So it's like, I look at the whole thing and just go, wow, I mean, this was the inevitable conclusion of it all, but I kind of see all the angles.
If I said to you, here, Matt, here's a hot dog, you're allowed to eat hot dogs. And then, okay, Matt, here's a second hot dog, and we're going to put the 2 hot dogs in a bag. But once they're in a bag, they're just a bag, right? It's not a bag of hot dogs. It's just a bag. Like, no, it's a bag. Like, it's hot dogs in the bag, and they are hot dogs are over-unders, right? Just because you put 2 over-unders in the bag does not mean it is no longer a sports bet. You've created an entirely different product. Like, that's just not the case. So now we look at what's going on, and I think the natural question, and it's fair if you're asking this, if you're just listening to this for the first time, it's fair if you're in the Underdog and Prize Picks offices to ask the conspiracy theory question of why is this all happening right now and why is it happening so fast, right? And so we're with you on that. Like, this is a story, like, that we've talked about on this pod for quite a long time. I think there are a few theories that can hold some level of water. And mind you, these are just theories. These are not things that we're reporting as fact. We've done plenty of that already this week. California failed miserably at the ballot this last time around. Texas had a chance of legalizing. It didn't really go anywhere. And I think all of the sports betting companies can look and say, we're not getting into California anytime soon. Our next chance at Texas is at 2025. And we realize that these other companies have a huge advantage on us now. They were willing to wait a little bit maybe to see what was going to go on with those two states. Again, all in theory. And maybe they don't want to give the DFS companies that are offering a sports betting product a 2-year free run, knowing that they can't do anything with it right now. There's also been my conspiracy theory for the longest of times that Prize Picks, Underdog, etc., companies like this that might be built to sell, and that maybe the sale isn't going quite the way that some on either side would have imagined, and maybe this is a negotiating tactic in some way. Again, I'm deep into the conspiracy theories on this, but I've actually had a couple of weird conspiracy theories play out this week, and so I'm going to go completely do my own research mode here and put them out there.
So, Dustin, do you think that there's, I kind of thought this through as well as we were heading into the pod, and like, do we think also at least, maybe a 10% chance here that just like lawmakers start paying a little bit more attention to sports betting stuff or fantasy sports stuff as we head into football season, just naturally? Like, it's like we're heading into kind of the biggest part of the year, the part of the year where most of their people, their constituents, their, any laws, anything is going to be like way more kind of in the spotlight than in the doldrums of the summer. Like, we're kind of on the home stretch here. Hell, we played a fake real football game last night. So, I mean, like, we are now in football season. So I don't know if maybe like you just, even if you're just one of these states, you start to pay a little bit more attention as we head into kind of the real hot part of the year.
I think what's behind this is people just didn't really know this category existed, right? That's the big thing. Like we could say, oh yeah, like all of us, again, we're always in the bubble. We've known Prize Picks and Underdog, these companies, the people behind them, we've known them for a while. No, like it's a big leap to just assume, oh, this has got into the zeitgeist and people know like what's going on, right? Like it's like we know, like it's around now, like it's just part of fantasy, and people in the sports betting ecosystem, like people just know that it's just more out there than it ever was. It's again the same arc of regular fantasy. DraftKings and FanDuel were this kind of cute little thing on the side. Oh, daily fantasy, neat. And then it started getting big, and there's more headlines about it, and there's more people were aware of it. And like because that's the same questions we were having. Like, why did it take till 2015, 16 for anybody to say, oh, there's a question about daily fantasy sports as sports betting? Like that's like, it's because nobody really knew it existed. So now we have, finally, these companies are pretty big. There's just more talk about them. We had the Wall Street Journal story, I guess, last week. Some of this action predates that, but like, there's just more about this, right? There's more about it out in the world. And I think that's part of it. It's just everybody's more familiar with it. And yeah, it's just assume that everybody like, oh, we know this is existing. I don't think that's true. So I think what we've learned is like, yes, we've seen there's just regulators at least didn't know this existed in a lot. That's why we're seeing these actions. And I mean, my challenge I would love to see this. This is a thought experiment that's impossible to do. I'd love to put the Underdogs and Prize Picks pick'em contest in front of lawmakers who passed daily fantasy sports laws over the years and say, is this what you thought you were getting out of that? And there's nobody who's going to say yes. I was like, yes, we want parlay betting. That's what we're okay with that. Yes, the regulators on the other end might be saying, well, this is the law they wrote. This is what we ended up with. Maybe it's okay, but that's it. So I think it's just the years of these companies existing, and finally, again, with the background of the sports betting industry coming under all this scrutiny, we have this other category that's not really under the same rules and being able to do more whatever they want. I think it was natural that we're going to get some scrutiny on this. So, my last question is a hot dog a sandwich? Since we're putting hot dogs in a
absolutely not. A hot dog is just its own entity. It's just its own. It lives in its own
meat
space.
Between bread. How is it not a sandwich?
But because it's a bun is not like a hamburger is not a sandwich. A burger's a burger. It's not a sandwich. Like burgers has its own little thing on a menu. It's like there's sandwiches and then there's burgers on a menu, and so it'd be the same thing. Like under sandwiches on a menu, you're not going to find hot dogs. Like that's not going to be.
But you
there.
often will find burgers listed under sandwiches, depending on where you go.
Most menus it's sandwiches and then burgers. Like they got their own little area, because they've earned that. The burgers have earned that.
Hot dog and sandwich. Next topic.
Adam, what? Real quick here, though. One of the other things. This is just a complete aside with all of this, because we get like so much of the hashtag gambling Twitter that goes crazy about the offerings and things that are available at some of the sports books, and how it's like, oh, they're pushing these things that are like negative EV, et cetera, blah 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 blah. And it's like the only reason Prize Picks exists is because it's multi-leg parlays, right? I mean, like you're like, it's a whole product based around like bets, again, like are like bad for the consumer and in general, right? And like that ain't even so, and I mean, that's like so in the weeds whenever it comes to like other problems with all of this. But like seriously, it's like the whole product is like people making bad bets, like making bad gambling decisions.
I mean, do you think that they should change the tagline to the original same game parlay? like maybe that would be better marketing. And look, if you're not clear as to why it's a thing, right? Like you might just ask yourself, like, why can't everybody just be, right? Like, why can't everybody just operate? Well, it's different sets of laws. It's extremely different amounts of money that it takes to get into the space and be able to operate in the space. Because if right now, as they exist today, if Prize Picks and Underdog had to try to compete with DraftKings and FanDuel on the same playing field, they would get blown away the same way that everybody else who's trying to compete with them is getting blown away. Doesn't mean that's the case forever, right? Underdog has made clear in the past that it has ambitions of becoming a sports book, right? Prize Picks is strictly DFS, again, air quotes. But there are completely different sets of licensure, laws, entry fees, cost of doing business. That's why this is a big deal, because we're talking about playing fields that are not level from state to state.
And Dustin, just finally to put a bow on this, I mean, one, DFS, as you and I have come to accept it over the years. I know you and I weren't always on the same side of the fence with all of this, but at DFS, as we have come to accept it, it is at least peer to peer. Like peer versus peer, right? I mean, like this is player versus house. I mean, that is like the major difference in this there. I mean, like it is still me versus you whenever we are going in and playing DFS. It is not that case with these other things, which is like the most obvious thing ever for someone who knows what they're talking about.
Yeah, like peer-to-peer gaming, like I guess I just don't, like at this point, I lost the DFS wars. Like you win, I lose. We're all, but yeah, like again, peer-to-peer, like who cares? Yeah, this is again, it's against the house. Not like Adam said at the beginning, like not all of their products are that, but this is the biggest category. Is fantasy versus the house? Like it's and it's you break it all down. It's just hard to that, like, I totally agree with Adam. That's why reason I am passionate about it, because we didn't take down PASPA 5 years ago just to create unregulated sports betting. Like that should not be the outcome of what happened. And that's kind of what, that's where we're trending toward. And last one, like I know there's a lot of noise. And again, I think Adam alluded to this. DraftKings and FanDuel are making a lot of noise, and that's some of the, maybe what is behind all this, but it's immaterial to me that DraftKings and FanDuel are behind this. Like it's either it is or it isn't. Yes, again, DraftKings and FanDuel passed all these laws that kind of led to all this. Again, I don't care. Like, and I don't care that there's sour grapes from them. I mean, I care. It's funny, but it's also immaterial. Like we just have this whole category that exists that arguably shouldn't exist. And I reject the idea that like everybody's cool with unregulated parlays, kind of, or quasi-regulated parlays across the country. I don't think that's what anybody really envisioned out of all of this. And you can take issue with how it's coming about, but I think it's just not germane to the discussion.
Adam, we have jumped up and down and beat the drum, and the whole reason that we're saying that like this industry is actually a good thing and things that have happened is because it's licensed and regulated, and there's rules that you have to follow, and there's money that has to be paid, and all the things that we've preached is like that is not what's happening here. At that point, why don't we just say like, okay, go bet offshore or whatever? I mean, like it's the same deal, because if you're not playing by the same rules as everyone else has to play for, then what the hell are we doing here?
First of all, shout out to Dustin for both Zeitgeist and Germain in one
the same
podcast.
sentence. I think that might have even been in the same sentence. I don't know if there was a pause in there, a semicolon. I don't know if there was a ... like whenever you're texting. But yes, I mean that was something else. Yeah,
not even thesaurus. That's a he-saurus. Like that is him right there. Very well done. Proud of that. Let's dig into a conversation that we had. I'm just going to say with someone who operates in the DFS space this week. And that person said to us, well, keep in mind that this is, we're talking about an American company that's employing people and giving them jobs. And it's offshore is worse because, offshore is working against the industry and it's unregulated and this and that. And my takeaway from that conversation is, yeah, you're employing people, but if the operation is illegal, I don't care if it's happening against U.S. law at a state level or U.S. law at a federal level, right? Because we talk about offshore violating federal law. Mm-hmm. We talk about these potentially violating state laws. Like, you're really grasping at straws if that's the level you're down to.
Well, I have one more point on all this. If DraftKings and FanDuel could do this, they'd be doing it in a heartbeat, right? That's the other underlying part of this. If they thought they could do this legally and not get in trouble and keep their licenses and just start serving parlays to California, Texas, and Florida tomorrow, they do it tomorrow. But I think they've come to the realization that's not going to happen, or there's too much risk involved with it. So that's why we're seeing them be loud about it, because they would love to be able to do this. Don't mistake that for anything else. If they could do this, they would, but they're not going to, because it's a risk that they're not willing to take.
The most popular long word in the English language is incomprehensibilities. That is 21 letters, and that is the most frequently used long. Again, whatever they describe as a long word. So incomprehensibilities, 21 letters.
Who said that? I've never even heard of that word.
I know, right? I know. The next one is interdisciplinary. The next one is interdisciplinary, 17 letters. So if we want to add those in at some point, the rest of this.
We are the arbiters of words. This is what we do for a living. We're not good at real things, but we can tell you what happens with words.
I know. I can't believe all these incomprehensibilities. I mean, seriously.
Oh, yeah. Don't try to get that into the zeitgeist.
All right, Adam. Let's head to college football. And this is a story in which, look, again, inevitability of all of this happening. Honestly, this is another one of the deals, too, where we shouldn't look at this as a bad thing and more look at it as a good thing, because, again, this has always been going on. It's just easier to catch people doing things now because there is a licensed and regulated market.
We've known for a while that there's an investigation going on in Iowa that involves a number of student athletes at both the University of Iowa and Iowa State. I think what is most notable about this whole situation is not that the Iowa Racing and Gaming Commission was investigating, it's that we're talking about criminal charges. Mm-hmm. And that's the big difference from what we're used to talking about when it comes to, did college athlete X bet on sports? Well, there's some charges that have been filed here that have to do with destruction of records, that have to do with falsifying whose account was actually being used. Best to go read the story at legalsportsreport.com for all of the details here. But the piece of this story that's gotten the most attention is the backup quarterback at Iowa State, Hunter Deckers, who placed a number of wagers, including on games in which he was on the sidelines, not participating, but on the sidelines. It covers football. There are baseball players involved in this. There are wrestlers involved in this. It involves parents and their accounts being used to try to cover up whose wagers were being placed. There's NCAA discipline, and we've covered the revised policy that could come and be in play here. But the bigger question is that we have charges that have been filed. And as you said, Matt, this is exactly the way that it's all supposed to work. And to me, it's almost like someone who says to you, you're going to have to get a shot tomorrow, but it's a shot that is going to protect you against disease in the long run. And You've known for a while you have to get the shot. You're kind of like, I don't like needles. I want to take it. We are in the process in the legal sports betting market at the moment of the needle going in. In the long term, everyone will be better for this if we can get through what feels like the shock of this moment. And it's going to be the shock of the moment right now because we're catching the things that have been going on for a long time. They weren't happening on apps. They weren't happening out in the daylight. Players were betting with each other. Players were betting with bookies. Players were betting offshore. All of these things were going on. It's just that now it's happening in what is theoretically the legal market. Well, it's not theoretically. It is practically. This is exactly what's supposed to happen.
Dustin, it's very easy, I think, for skeptics out there to take a look and start pointing the finger and say, like, oh, well, okay, legalized sports betting. Now look at all this stuff that's happening. Listen, I can tell you this just from experience. I sat in my first day of orientation in college, and you sit in there with all the rest of people who were trying to play sports in college. And before they tell you to go get books, before they tell you to go to class, they're like, do not gamble, do not bet. And this is, this was, over 20 years ago. I mean, that is like literally the first thing that comes out of their mouth. So, I mean, like this has been it's been going on. It's been a thing for a while. And again, it was actually just probably happening way easier because we didn't have ways to catch people doing this stuff. And so I know I see the stuff. I see that what people are saying, look, see what happens. You make it available and blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, this was going on. This was happening. They've known it was a thing for a long, long, long time. And now the system's actually working. It should not be a point the finger situation. It should be more of a golf clap situation, more of a golf clap.
Yeah.
Type.
I mean, I think there's probably some scale involved with the legal market coming, right? Because it's more people are aware. You have the apps in your state, all that. I think there's a matter of scale, but 100%. This has been going on. Like people just keep like it's really aggravating. I know to all of us that like sports betting dropped out of the ether 5 years ago and never existed before, right? That's not the case. It's this. This has been like we've lived with this for a while. You could like all those things, offshore, Nevada, all of this has happened before. And I have news for everyone too. This is not just an Iowa problem. If you think this is like an Iowa State problem, no, it's not anywhere else. This exact same nonsense is going on everywhere. Like there's like, this is just the tip of the iceberg, right? Like, so if you just think, oh, this is isolated to a bunch of Iowa athletes, no way, man. Like this is going on everywhere. Mm-hmm. And I will, I say all this though, that there's going to be a push to overreact to this too, like to try to, I think to ban college betting, to do all this other stuff. And that again, not the answer at all, because then you just shove everything back into, to local bookies, offshore, whatever. It's not the answer. The answer is the regulated market and to stop this. And I think the other part of it is definitely education. Even though you say it's hammered into people, like there's obviously a big disconnect between the education efforts and what's actually going on the ground, in NCAA programs. I maintain I can't believe this is just an NFL problem. The NFL is the only one we've heard problems with. You're telling me nobody in any other sport has placed a bet somewhere? Come on, I just don't believe any of that. So like there has to be just like now it's everything's gotten real, right? Like we have to be better with the education and be more clear, because now we have criminal charges. We have people losing years of eligibility or suspended for a year. Like I think hopefully we're at this inflection point where things are finally going to get we're going to talk about this a little more real matter and not just pretend that it doesn't exist.
And Adam, to put a bow on this, like, again, like everybody wants to point the finger. Everyone wants to like make a reason for why something happened. Where like, I think sometimes we can just look at stuff just on the surface level and just say, you know what? Sometimes people do stupid things and then they're just going to have to pay the consequences of doing said stupid thing. Right. I mean, I don't think we always have to there has to be some sort of deep rooted reason for something. And this is exactly why this is going down. And this is how we have to fix everything. It's like, you know what? Sometimes people do dumb things. Like you could ask this kid on a lie detector test, do you know that it was dumb, that it was wrong to bet on your own team, whatever? He's going to fail that if he says no. Of course he knows. Like he just did it anyway. Right. I mean, sometimes people do dumb things and you have to pay the price for it.
I know someone who used to work for one of the largest school districts in the country, and they worked in communications, and they often were the first person to get the phone call when a teacher would be arrested for doing something lewd or something that they shouldn't be doing with a student. And, if 2 or 3 of these happened in a week, then all of a sudden the TV headline would be crisis in the school district. Whereas my friend who's dealing with it would say to reporters on background, like, we're an organization of 20,000 people. There are going to be bad actors. We cannot expect that among that many people, everyone is going to do things the right way at all times.
Exactly. And that's just kind of what we're dealing with all this. Dustin, let's go to our friend David Purdom and a tweet put out by him that is getting super intelligent comments on it. I can see already. Really great comments from it already. But a letter, a letter to Congresswoman Titus.
Yeah, Congresswoman in Nevada, long been a proponent of legal sports betting, obviously with Nevada having sports betting for a long time. NFL is calling for quote unquote federal engagement to address the illicit sports betting market, which still has the power of incumbency. There's a lot to unpack here. Number one, like, okay, great. We've been talking about federal enforcement for 5 years. Like, why are we thinking it's going to be a priority for the Department of Justice? Like, unless a sports book or online casino is engaged in, terrorism or other things, like, it's not going to be the point. There's way bigger fish to fry in general at the federal level to try to stop this stuff. If they could stop it, great. But we just don't like. I just don't like NFL calling on it and a congresswoman saying, "Let's go do something." Like, great. I would love for that to happen, but I think it's just it's wishful thinking that it's going to happen. The other part about this that I find it very funny is that the NFL doing this, like the reason we have a robust illicit market is because of the NFL, and not just the NFL. Obviously, the other leagues. They are the ones who pushed for the federal ban and the PASPA. They're the ones who continue to try to keep sports betting out of the U.S. in the federal court case against New Jersey. Like, it exists because of you. I know they're not going to admit that in this, but that's the backstory of this: is that we have a robust illegal market because the sports leagues stopped a illegal market from happening for decades. So, like, it's just funny to me, like, to hear this again. Great that the NFL is coming out for this. I just don't. I think it's probably much ado about nothing, and it's not going to end up in. We're not going to start seeing crackdowns on illegal sportsbooks tomorrow because the NFL sent a letter to a congresswoman.
Yeah, I mean, Adam, listen, all this is great in theory, and we've talked about, like, we'd like to see at least something tried or done or whatever. But listen, the only way to really shut this stuff down is like make it to where people can't get their money on and off these sites. But the problem now with cryptocurrency is you just can't do that, right? I mean, like, they are always going to be able to operate if they want to. I mean, that's just the way that we've gotten now. I mean, the majority of these are now deposit withdrawal in Bitcoin as it is anyway, right? And so it's not like when Dustin and I went through the whole Black Friday thing in online poker, right? Like, you go in and you cut off like how you can get money on and off of these things, and like it's donezo, right? I mean, it was like there's no industry anymore if people can't get their money on and off. But like with Bitcoin, it is what it is. So like I'm sure there is something that could be done, at least to seize the domains or whatever. They'll just pop up another one. There'll be shell sites or whatever. But I don't know now what the real path to, again, air quote, victory is for the legal side of things.
I mean, this is complicated in so many different ways, right? Yeah. I mean, if you want to talk about the Bitcoin side and the crypto side, you're now talking about people taking on a much higher level of risk given what's happened in the cryptocurrency over the last 6 months, right? Like, that is risk that I don't think a lot of people are willing to take if they do not rephrase that. Those who need the outs that offshore provides are going to be willing to take that risk because they're liquid enough that they can afford to absorb the loss that might come with the value of their cryptocurrency going up and down, right? The average person is probably not going to get themselves involved in that, but the offshore market is going to allow wagers of the size and of the frequency that this is something that makes sense for certain people. Now, when we get into the idea of what can a crackdown do, it probably has to be a 5 dimes kind of situation where, this operator has some desire to be clean in some way. And we know that 5 dimes settled for $48 million because it was being investigated for a number of years for potential violations of federal law. And we know that 5 dimes did have some desire to go clean. So for those that don't have the desire to get into the white market in some way, yeah, it's going to be really hard to ever do anything real, because most of these operations, because they're headquartered in places that have much more lax laws, you could pretty much shut down the office in Curacao and show up in Antigua tomorrow and start the whole thing over again.
Dustin, this one was great. LMAO, run a proper book then. The legals are 10 times shadier than the offshore, and it's not even close. Basically, this is a letter written on behalf of crooks, in parentheses, legal books, to a bunch of dirty crooks, parentheses, politicians. So that's the kind of, that's the kind of the comments we're getting on this. So, again, just guys that are totally informed in all this that are waiting.
Yeah, and again, this all kind of, everything we've been talking about today all comes together. Like this is part of the cost of doing business too. Yes, it's much easier to run an offshore sports book. Like you don't have to pay taxes. You don't
agree.
Have to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like we've said that since day one. Like we agree. Like we get it. Like we understand.
So it's no wonder they have a better product for you, right? Like it's not like this is not rocket science, because but the other part of it is. You really want to combat the illicit market? Again, you open up California, Texas, and Florida, and then all of a sudden, that's again that you have that access to 90 million people if you're offshores that do not have any legal options other than prize picks and at all. So it's all full circle. Like I'm not saying that ends online sports, offshore online sports betting in the U.S., but that makes it a lot harder to do business because you still have this huge population that you're serving to that doesn't have access to a legal option.
Adam, let's close things out here. We used to talk numbers and we would just talk handle numbers and different things, stuff like that. But listen, there's too many states to report on that. Sometimes the reporting isn't all that great anyway. So we talk different numbers now, and let's talk the dollar bills that are actually going in and out of the bank account for these big companies.
Well, we can talk about them differently than we used to be, because it used to be a whole lot of dog bites, man, of sports betting company X loses $500 million in this quarter, but they say everything's right on track. Don't you worry about us. And it turned out that they were wrong about that. Everything was not right on track. There were major course corrections in terms of marketing spend. Some companies laid people off or eliminated positions. And wouldn't you know that once a more rational environment came around, that we're talking about Q2 of 2023 earnings where multiple gaming operators are reporting profit in their sports betting segments. Caesars is reporting profit. We know that DraftKings is reporting profit, and no mystery, right? Caesars at one point lost up to $1 billion when they were out here offering $3,300 to every person who signed up in a 51% tax market in New York. Now that ended quickly,
and $100 million contract
goals.
with JB Smoove as well. I mean, like that was, at least a 9-figure contract with him for sure.
You better watch out, because if you draw too much attention to that, JB's going to lose his job, and he's going to have to go back to pitching seltzers or whatever he's doing up on the billboards that I'm looking at. Ultimately, what we saw is that companies made smarter decisions, and that led to more profit. And I hate the fact that it means that customers in the legal market didn't get the same sort of offers that they have been in the past. I hate the fact that it means that for a company like DraftKings, they cut 140 positions. And we have to talk about these things honestly if we're going to talk about the whole story. Like, it's sad, but it speaks to the irrationality of the market over the course of the first 3-ish years, and the fact that we're now coming into a saner environment and that it's more possible to make money in that environment. With this caveat, a lot of it is being done on the backs of pushing parlays. And the fact that hold is up around 10, 11% for a lot of these companies, when historically in Nevada over the course of 50 years, 5.4 is the hold number, because it's all coming out of same game parlays. It's all coming out of these multi-legs that are being pushed. So how long are people willing to do it? Maybe the answer is a lot longer than we originally imagined, because people like the lottery ticket aspect of this. If Mega Millions is up at $1 billion, people are still willing to throw $20 at it because they've got a shot, right? And maybe they don't want to go in and grind minus 110 sides or minus 115 or minus 120. They don't care about it in the first place. Maybe they just want to keep firing off $20 at a 4-leg parlay in the hopes they hit this one.
So, Dustin, I've actually come around on this from where I was whenever we first started going on this, and I have to understand, like I think we do this at least fairly well. We realize how in the weeds and in the bubble we are, and having to take a step back and look at this from the outside in, and certainly myself, like try to look at it from a non-gambler aspect. Again, I've been long-time gambler, done it over 20 years and stuff, and so like I get the whole EV and negative EV and all that. Well, I've done just basically my own little straw polls, going around. I've fortunate enough this summer, I've gone to several different legal sports betting states. I've been down to Arizona. I've been to Illinois. I've been to Tennessee. I've been to Colorado. And like, when I see people betting or whatever, like I'll ask them little questions here and there and just try to kind of get a beat of what's going on. And even my friends in Louisiana, right, who just have had it for about a year now and things that they were doing when we were all together this past summer, I'm going around and I'm asking them, hey, what's going on here with this and what do you do and all. I'm actually like past saying that the books are pushing the parlay stuff. And I'm just saying like, they're just giving these people what they want, because like literally I talk to all these people and that's all they want to do. Like they don't, like there is no betting 110s. Like they don't give a shit about that. Like it is straight up like literally it's straight. Like they want, like Adam said, they want the $10 to turn it into $250. Like they want the $5 that if you hit the 9 legs, it's going to be $1,000. Like, I mean, and they're all doing it. And I ask, like, I'm literally sitting in this room with 10 of my friends going, I mean, but like, don't you lose these things like way, 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 way more often than you win them? And they're like, yeah, but when you hit them, it's like, but when you hit them, and like, that's the answer I'm getting. It's like, I've kind of come around. I've made a different opinion on this. And I think that I'm not weak. It's not a weak mindset for me to like change my thought and change my opinion on stuff like this. I actually think they're just giving people what they want, like more than anything else.
100%. Yeah. People, I mean, it's an entertainment product, right? Yes, it's gambling, but like people want to be entertained. Like people are way more entertained, like you said, on that lottery ticket, on the $5 same game parlay, or $1 to win 100,000. Like, oh, I created this crazy thing. It's probably not going to hit, but maybe I'll win, right? Yeah. It's the same as the lottery. Like you're not going to win the lottery, or you're probably not going to hit your huge parlay all the time, but like that's more exciting to somebody than, like you said, grinding out, like betting $100 on a 110 side. Like that's not what the average bettor wants. It's pretty clear at this point. Yes, it is chicken and the egg. Do we have the sports books push it? Yes. Do people want the product? Absolutely yes. There's really no doubt about this. This is what people want to bet right now. They don't want to bet tons of money on sides. They're more happy losing parlays and hitting that one every once in a while all the time. It's, and the other part of the earnings season, to get back to that, is like, these are we don't talk about it on this podcast because we're more about sports betting, but online casino is behind all this too. Like that is a huge part of driving. FanDuel and DraftKings are two of the biggest operators in that part of the segment, even the limited amount of states that online casino is. So that's where we're going to turn right next year. Cause like we talked about, California, Texas kind of off the board next year. Online casino is the next push for lobbying for these companies and for the whole ecosystem, because that's the next generation. You don't have a ton of states where you're going to legalize sports betting next year, even if you really wanted to. You might have a handful at best with a legitimate chance of passing some sports betting. So you're going to see more eyes on casino, trying to get that customer and all of that. So that's in the background of all of this, even though these are forward-facing sports betting companies. The MGM, Caesars, FanDuel, DraftKings, these are online casino companies which is a more profitable business for them as well.
Yeah, Adam, I think it's a good point by Dustin right there. And that's kind of how I was going to follow up with you too, is like, if I think we'll probably see more of this, or more at least iterations of this, because look, California ain't happening. You already said that. Texas, we know it isn't happening until at earliest 2025, right? Like we don't really, the whole stuff going on in Florida, whatever. Like, so the big focuses on these other states isn't really necessary currently. And as we head into football season, and certainly as we head into March Madness and all these other things, like I imagine we're going to see all kinds of different versions of this and new ways to go about it and all that. And like, that's probably where the focus is right now, as opposed to expansion.
And this is going to be a much more fraught issue. Legislators and regulators take a much more cautious approach to it. Now you're going to start to really encroach in the area where tribal interests are not going to be happy with the potential loss of business. Like there's a lot that's going to come into play, and there will be plenty for us to talk about.
Yeah, it's going to be great. Guys, everything we do, absolutely free over at legalsportsreport.com. So go over and read all of the great words Adam and team are putting down over there. So please go and do that. And of course, you can follow Adam and Dustin absolutely free over on the Twitter machine at Adam Candee, 2 E's, no Y, and at Dustin Gouker as well. If you're listening to this on the audio side, if you want to hit pause and hit the little 5-star, we would certainly be appreciative of that as well. For Dustin, for Adam, I'm Matt. Talk to you guys next week.